Welcome to Wednesday. We are in our lesson books where we have been the past few weeks apparently. I do have some material. These are just basically the verses for the evening. If anybody needs a copy, let me know. Anybody needs some verses for the study? Okay. Make me feel useful. Appreciate it. Okay, we are looking at lesson 22. And Pontius Pilate, that is our topic of discussion for the evening. Hopefully you all have had time to look at that and prepare and think through some of these scriptures. So have some productive discussion and talk. I will ask, right before we begin, I have not asked Brian McDonald to lead prayer, but I will ask Brian McDonald if he will lead us in prayer.
Pretty good. Trust Heavenly Father, we're so thankful, Lord, for the stead that you give us, the bounties and the beauty of it. We're thankful, most especially, Lord, for this beautiful time that you've given us to assemble ourselves together as with others with light, precious faith. Thankful for this opportunity to open your word and study from it. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the teachers that you have given us in our midst, those that are willing to take on the material, teach us for order, also those that are with their children. For this time, dear Heavenly Father, be with those teachers, help them to present their material in a way that's easily understood and according to your truth. Let us be with each one of us, help us to open our hearts, open our minds, and to study your word so we may better apply it to our lives, we may be better servants. Heavenly Father, we ask to be with those that aren't with us, whether it be from sickness or from a choice not to be here. We ask that you intervene with those people as their needs are known to you. Pray you forgive us where we failed you. Pray that you watch over us. Everything done and said this evening, we've done so in a manner that's pleasing in your sight. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. So Pilate, who is Pontius Pilate? Governor of where? Judea. Yeah. And specifically, who was in charge? Like, who was the world power? I mean, yeah, Rome. It was Caesar. And so Pontius Pilate was a governor in the area of Judea in this time period. Apparently, he had a decently long time that he was ruler in that area, which is interesting. There's a lot of stuff that we learn about Pilate. He's mentioned in a few passages here, and he's a pretty important guy in a lot of respects. Now, here's the thing. Before 1961, if you would have asked some scholars, was Pontius Pilate a real person? A lot of them would say, no, we don't have really solid evidence that he's there. But in 1961, there was a little discovery made that it wasn't anything special, but it had his name on it associated with Rome, and it said that he was the prefect of Judea, which is the governor. Which is just interesting how archaeology continues to give us credibility for the Bible. So that's really good and helpful. We are going to look at some of the ways that Jesus interacted with Pontius Pilate, though, and see what we can learn from this. We have been talking this entire quarter about how Jesus is the Word, and we see a lot about Jesus through the things that are revealed, specifically in the life of Christ. We're getting close to the end, and we'll be wrapping that up just here next week, I do believe. Do want to open this up, though. As we do with every class, there are 3 questions that we look at. What did you notice in this passage that you hadn't noticed before, or what struck you as interesting or significant? So, who wants to open this up? Something interesting, significant, something that really stood out to you about these passages about Pilate. What do you got?
I just find it interesting that whenever they brought Jesus to him, he knew that it was all just a sham, but he was so worried about his good standing with Rome, because he had already kind of taken ground, that he would let an innocent person die just to keep himself in power. And I thought, wow, 2,000-something years ago, politicians were still the same as they are now.
It's funny, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Yeah, there was. And so, how would you classify Pilate as a ruler? How good was he?
Well, I mean, there were some
Yeah.
by the Jews.
Yeah, for sure. Like there was all kinds of stuff about him, and it seems like he didn't have a great reputation. And I think that, as we'll see as we go through this, he was definitely protecting his place in authority. So we'll come to that more later for sure. What else you all have? Yeah.
Well, he knew if he let Jesus go,
Mhm.
that there would be an uproar between the Jews and Roman soldiers, and Caesar's going to find out about that, and he's going to be shipped out.
And that's how it works. I mean, if you're not doing your job as the authority figure, then something's wrong. Now, here's think about this. Was Pilate stationed in Jerusalem all the time? You know? No. Where was he, John? Right, there you go. He would be in Caesarea. And I mean, Caesarea, the city literally has Caesar in the front of it. And so that's where he would be stationed at. Why do you think it was important for Pilate to be here in Jerusalem right now? Like, what events were happening? Passover. And so, like, why was that important for a ruler to be there during Passover? What's happening in the city? Yeah, that is true. That's what happened there. Was there like more people in Jerusalem than normal for that? Yeah, a ton, because there was the Feast of the Passover. You would come into Jerusalem and then you would celebrate and did this whole thing. So, with an influx of people, visitors there, Jews specifically, the person who was in charge of the region would kind of need to be there just to make sure that something like a riot or whatever didn't break out. And we could be rest assured if there was some sort of riot, he would be the first to go because he was the one in charge of it. Any other thoughts on that specifically?
Well, he most likely stayed in the palace of Herod, which was called the Praetorium, which would have been, for the most part, the same compound that Herod Agrippa would be at.
Good point, yeah. And so it's important to see, like, I think John, right. John chapter 18 tells us that, where was Jesus before he came to Pilate? Remember? Like, who was interrogating him?
He went to Annas, Caiaphas, and then to the Sanhedrin. He went to the Sanhedrin first thing in the morning. They went to the Praetorium.
Right, yeah, there we go. So he had been through a lot already up to this point, and we're just diving in, right? But there was a lot of stuff that was said before then. And do you remember, like, just in general, when the high priest and some others were trying to get charges against him, was it pretty easy to get charges together? Were they able to figure that out?
No, not really.
Why not?
Because, well, first of all, the Jews charged him with blasphemy, and Pilate just laughed it off.
Right.
Because it's your law, you take care of it.
And that's an interesting way that this sort of opens up and this starts. Now, so let's go through this. Let's think through this a little bit. So he had been with the Sanhedrin Council. He went through Annas, Caiaphas, and remember they were like, we can't even get two people to make up stuff against him. It was like you couldn't even get the story straight between people who were like trying to make things up, and they couldn't nail him down with anything. But then they bring him to the Praetorium. Now, something is mentioned about how the Jews sort of kept their distance. Do you remember what that was about?
Yeah, they couldn't enter the home of a Gentile.
Yeah, exactly.
The distance from the situation.
Right. And so we find out in John 18 that the Jews were kind of like outside. So Jesus was taken into the Praetorium, and the Jews were outside, and there was this back and forth debate. It's like Pilate had to go here and interrogate Jesus, then he would go out, talk to the Jews, and he would just back and forth. I'm sure this was infuriating for one, because just imagine what he's hearing from the Jews and what he's getting from Jesus. This is a crazy situation. But so you have him, the Jews wouldn't go in because they were afraid to defile themselves by going into the house of a Gentile. Now remember, during the Passover, what did the Jews have to do in their house? Like before the unleavened bread feast started? Purify and remove all the leaven and get all that out of the way. And so if you went into a Gentile residence like that was not good. You would be defiled, and so you could not continue with the celebration of the Passover. which is a big deal. Now think about this. You have the Jews who were dead set about not being defiled so that way they could partake in the Passover. What were they doing during this time, though? What were they trying to do? Yeah. So now yeah, okay, we're trying to murder this guy, but like I'm going to be ceremonially clean. You know, I'm going to do the Passover thing, right? It's like saying on the way to worship service Sunday morning, I need to take the Lord's Supper. I killed somebody, but you know that's besides the point. I'm going to take the Lord's Supper. Like sometimes when we have like major things that are wrong in our life, and the way that we get through that is by being very picky about like what we would say the little things. These aren't little things, by the way. But that's just what our mind does sometimes. You know, we try and get by with certain things because we do other things so well. So they were so focused on making sure that they were clean and could eat the Passover and all that. Definitely shows hypocrisy there. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
They couldn't kill him. I think the passage specifically says that they knew that they could not fulfill execution. They had to have the authority of Rome, the authority of Pilate to kill him. If they would have, but they couldn't kill him on their own. And if they would have killed him, they would have stoned him because that was the penalty for blasphemy. So meaning that they couldn't convict him themselves, they knew they had to have Pilate involved reluctantly, and that's why they did it.
Yeah, amen, exactly. And so we have this situation where if the Jews would have killed him, they would have done stoning because that's what they did. But how was it prophesied what was going to happen to the Messiah? If you put things together, you know, the whole hanging on a tree and all of those images, it had to be this way. Now, do you think that the Jews were thinking about that? Were they like, now we got to make sure we work this out? So that they were like actively trying to show that Jesus was not the Messiah, right? And so this is the whole thing. It's crazy how much they're trying to work against Jesus, but God is causing things to work together here. And maybe I kind of spoiled a little bit of the point I wanted to get with question number 2. And so I'll just say it, and I want you to give me some reasons why what I'm saying is right. Number 2, what did these passages communicate about God? We'll come back to number 1, don't worry. Think about this. God is in control, right? He is the one orchestrating this. He is doing the work behind the scenes and maybe not so behind the scenes. In what ways do we see God in control in this whole scenario?
He knew exactly to the nth degree what was going to happen. I mean, word by word, what was going to happen. He told it ahead of time.
Yeah, he did. I mean, Jesus told them what was going to happen. You have passages in the Old Testament about talking about some of the things that Jesus was going to experience here in this. I mean, Psalm 22 is one of like the clearest pictures of what Jesus, and a lot we'll see in the crucifixion, and I won't step on Michael's toes any there. But we see some things that are going on here that show that, I mean, God knew this was going to happen. They're not like taking him by surprise or anything. What else?
Plus, Pilate's wife had a dream about Pilate killing an innocent man. Now, who was involved with that?
I mean, there's no other explanation. I mean, you gotta put yourself in Pilate's shoes. Like, there's a lot of spooky things that are happening with this situation. And there's a lot of reasons for him to be like, yeah, we're not going to kill him. we're not going to do that. Let me ask this. Would Pilate have the authority to say, no, we are not going to crucify this guy?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Because in order to get him crucified, they had to go through him. Like that was the person that they had to go through. Was there anything mentioned in the text? I'll go ahead and fish this one out about the authority of Pilate. Do you remember that? Remember that encounter, the discussion Jesus had about authority?
They told him he would have no authority for God from above, I think.
Right. Yeah. Jesus said, "You." And what did Pilate say to like incite that? This is. Yeah, John 19:10. Pilate said, you do not speak to me? Do you not know I have the authority to release you and I have the authority to crucify you? Now, there's something kind of ironic about what he says there. He's like, don't you know I have this authority? I could just let you go if I wanted. But the thing is, he hadn't let him go yet. Was there anything that had happened previously, like during all of this time, that would make Pilate think that he should probably let Jesus go?
Other than his wife's dream?
Oh, yeah, other than that.
Well, he
Yep.
said he washed his hands and he find no fault in him.
Right. Yeah, and so the whole, there's no fault in him. Let's think about that a little bit. When Pilate was interrogating Jesus and trying to get these facts and details worked out and trying to come to the conclusion about that, how many times did he say, yeah, Jesus might be guilty? No. Now, how many times did he say something like, well, this probably wasn't so good, or you probably shouldn't have done it? Nothing. What did he say about the guilt of Jesus? Yeah, I find no fault. And he said that 3 different times, at least, maybe more. I don't know. But if you look at Luke's account and also John's account, you see that. And he said, I find no fault in this guy. Now, think about this. Think about how this would work. What if someone today is on trial for whatever, murder, whatever, and the judge finds that person not guilty? What happens after that? Released. But what if you're like, but the prosecution didn't like that, so maybe we should hang on to him and see what else we can find? Like,
You try.
yeah, this doesn't make sense. Like, if this happened in our modern courts, we'd be like, this is an outrage. Like, why? But this is exactly what happened to Jesus. He was pronounced innocent 3 times. It's like, and well, we'll get back to that one later, but he was pronounced innocent 3 times. Now, there's something else that happens here, and I think hopefully you notice this as well. He tries to do the Jews a favor a lot. He tries to, like, butter them up, I guess you could say. And what did he do to Jesus in order to try to appease them? Do what? Yeah, scourged him. Now, what would a scourging be like? Awful. And I mean, we've talked about what this looks like and what's involved with that. I mean, it's not just whipping, but it's taking pieces of metal, bone, glass, whatever, and putting at the end of the whip and let it just rip the flesh off of your back. And Pilate even says, he uses the word punish. I find no guilt in him, so because of that, I'm just going to punish him and release him. It's like, wait, hold up, what? Why are you going to punish him? He didn't do anything wrong. And it wasn't just like, don't do that. It was ripping his flesh. That is, I mean, obviously, this doesn't make sense. And it's a little overkill. But at this point, what do you think that does to the Jews who were there, who were like trying to get him to, give him the death sentence?
You slap in his face.
Yeah. He wanted it. It's sort of like there's blood in the water now. Pilate has proven himself to be unreliable when it comes to actually holding up justice. It shows them that if we keep pushing enough, maybe we can get him to actually go through with it. Because, like, honestly, if Pilate was the kind of ruler he was supposed to be, the second he found out that Jesus was innocent, that there's no guilt in this man whatsoever, he'd be like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but like, you go. Like, this is crazy. This isn't going to work. But
Showed his weakness, I think, by being influenced by all of this crap. He wanted to please them. He knew it was wrong, or I guess, because he said, I find no guilt. But he was influenced by the crowd.
was so much. Yeah.
Despite his actions here, I mean, he in Matthew County, verse 22, he asked one of the most important questions of all time that applies to us today so good though. I mean, what shall I do with this Jesus which is called the Christ? I mean, that's a question that's on every one of us, that's still applicable today. What do I gotta do? What do I do with Jesus that's called Christ? Am I gonna do the same way, do the same thing, and turn my back on him, or we're gonna act differently?
That's a really good point there. You know, what do I do with Jesus? We do have to ask ourselves that question, and I heard a lesson about that 2 weeks ago, and it was really powerful because that's exactly right. What did the Jews do with Jesus? What did Pilate do with Jesus? And what are we doing with Jesus? And that's a constant thing that we have to work with. Yeah.
I was gonna say that, it wasn't just the people. It was people, but it wasn't just the people. He was fearful of what they would say if they would push this up further. Because he's not doing what they want, but he was fearful of losing his own position as a result of them going higher and not doing what they want.
Right.
It was beyond just that setting there and the group of people that were there.
Yeah. The Jews were very smart in how they handled this situation. Smart in a bad way. Smart's not always good. And Pilate was also, he was being very cautious about how he was handling this too. Because, I mean, you don't want to riot, you want to keep your position, but, then again, you want to have some integrity. Didn't seem like he did. But and you have all of that is going into this as well. So that's interesting. So let's talk about Barabbas. Let's bring this one up. Barabbas, who was he? Murderer. Insurrectionist. What's insurrection?
January 6th.
Yep. Okay, there you go. Riots. Anytime that we are trying to do something to overthrow the government, something along those lines, like stirring up the people, trying to get them, we're going to take Rome out, and that's what it would have looked like there. That's interesting in some ways. What accusations did the Jews bring against Jesus when they talked to Pilate? That he is stirring up the people, that he's trying to get them to go against Rome. Okay, that's interesting, because if you really think about this, Pilate may be doing something tricky here. And maybe you thought about this, but Pilate, in bringing up Barabbas, everybody knows what Barabbas did, and everybody knows how bad Barabbas was. Now, and here's the thing, Barabbas was probably on the slate for the death penalty that day. He was probably, because they don't do that all the time, and so they had that lined up. But now, even though Barabbas had done all of those things, and he gives the people a choice, it's like, okay, and maybe what he's doing is surely they're going to see Barabbas and be like, we can't let this guy back out. He was a real troublemaker, and this is not going to work out so well. But even then, when he gives them that option, what do they want? They're like, free him. We want him free because Jesus is so bad. He's so terrible. Okay, that doesn't make sense at all. But that's what they do. You know what the name Barabbas means? Look that up at all? Yeah, the Father's son. It's like son of the Father. Like Bar, the 3 letters B-A-R, the forename means son of. But yeah, son of the Father. That's interesting. Can you make any connections here with the name of Barabbas and what Jesus was? Who was Jesus? Yeah, he was the son of the Father. He was the son of God. There we go. So that's kind of, I wouldn't say funny, but it is interesting that he has that connection there. Now, think about this too. Jesus is about to go through something he's obviously not guilty for. He hadn't done any of this. He wasn't deserving of death, not deserving of any of these punishments. Barabbas was. Barabbas was very much he deserved all of that. And I think we would see that. But instead of Barabbas being the one that paid with his life, capital punishment, Jesus is the one that paid essentially for Barabbas. He took the place of Barabbas. Does that sound familiar at all for what Jesus does? I mean, what does he do for us? There you go. He takes our place. Honestly, if you're looking at this story and you can relate to anybody, we are Barabbas. Like that's us. That's us in this story. We are Barabbas, and even though we deserve the punishment that our sin deserves, Jesus took our place, and he took that. Now this is crazy because this is what the Jews asked for. They asked for that. They were like, we want Barabbas to come out. And it's crazy to me that you can get to that position, that as a Jew, you're supposed to, love God and love the law, and you're looking for Messiah and all of this, but they just totally missed it, obviously. Any other thoughts on that?
Just talk about
Yeah.
1911.
Yep.
At the end of it there, it was mentioned a couple times there, but talking about Pilate, even though he washed his hands and tried to rid himself of the guilt, in 1911 there, Jesus says, he tells him, therefore, who delivered me from greater sin. That implies he still sin in this case, for one thing, but the other thing, I really hadn't thought about, I guess, before I read it this time was, talking about levels of sin here. I think Jesus was probably just using that sort of accommodatively. I don't know, what are your thoughts? If you consider James chapter 2, verse 10,
Mm-hmm.
if you're guilty of one sin, even the smallest, you're guilty of all. I don't know, just curious what your thoughts on that are.
Well, just to add,
Yeah, go ahead.
because I was on the same thought too. James chapter 4:17, to know right and not do it, guilty of sin. And that's what Pilate did. He knew what to do was right. He knew Jesus was innocent, but went the other way anyway.
True. Now, there's a lot to think about with that question and this scenario. Pilate is not innocent in this situation at all. Like, we know, like, he knew the right thing to do. And by the way, the whole, like, washing hands of the situation, did that really do anything? Like, if Rome came and investigated this, and Pilate said, oh, nope, I was crossing my fingers. I washed my hands. I'm good. No, he had to make that call. He had to be the one that gave his stamp of approval. And so that absolutely did nothing. So was Pilate innocent in any way? No. Now, there's something interesting about that verse. In John 19, look at that. Verse 10. 11. So you have no authority unless it's given. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin. Who was it that delivered Jesus to Pilate? The Jews. Now, if you look in this account specifically, back in chapter 18, verse 28, where did they lead Jesus from? Or who did he? From Caiaphas. And what was Caiaphas' role? High priest. Out of anybody who should have known better, Caiaphas was definitely him. I mean, you think about it, because as high priest, you should know the law better than anybody. You should understand things better than anybody. You should not be one who is trying to falsely accuse someone and put them to death. That's just, you shouldn't do that at all. And as we all know, with great power comes great responsibility. To whom much is given, much is required, right? That's the actual Bible quote. And so in that position that Caiaphas was in, he, above all else, should have known. And so he is really taking the brunt of this. Now, what do we do with that, though? Are there levels of sin? Do we look at things, levels of punishment? Because James, too, does say that we have, if you are guilty in one point, like you're a lawbreaker. And how do we look at that? This is a much deeper discussion than any of us are prepared to have right now. But if you think about that, if we sin, we are guilty and we deserve to be punished. So, Pilate, he sinned, he deserves to be punished. I mean, is he going to get out of jail free card for that? I mean, no. Like, there's still that. Maybe something to consider. Luke 12:48 talks about people who have different understandings. If you look at Luke 12, verse, let's go 47. The slave who knew the master's will and did not get ready or act according to his will receive many lashes. But the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive but few. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required, and to whom they entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more. So maybe there's a sense in which there is a stricter punishment. I mean, James even says, like, don't a lot of you be teachers because we have stricter judgment. So maybe there's a little bit of that goes into that as well. Something to think about, chew on, and discuss. I'll make sure that you can ask Michael that on Sunday. Okay. Anybody have anything else to add to that?
I think it's interesting, the interaction. I mean, Pilate is said to have tried to rid himself of the responsibility of Jesus 4 times. One of them is when he sent him to Herod Antipas. I just think that that's a whole interesting interaction, an attempt to really remove himself from the situation, and just that interaction between the man who had beheaded John.
Right, there we go. So we have completely not discussed Herod yet. Herod, the account of that is only found in Luke. And it is Herod Antipas. What else do we know Herod Antipas from? Remember what else he did famously? John the Baptist. Yeah. Now, does Herod Antipas have any relation to Herod the Great that tried to kill all the babies in Jerusalem when Jesus was a baby? He was the son. So Herod the Great was the father. Then you have Herod Antipas, who was there. Not to be confused with Herod Agrippa I, who killed the Apostle James and was eaten by worms, Book of Acts. Or Herod Agrippa II, who was the one that Paul was having that discussion with in Acts 26. So there's a lot of Herods. Herod was like a family name, and it was the title. And yeah, they have. If you look up, just Google. Just do this when you get home. Don't do it right now. But if you do it when you get home, a Herod family tree. It's crazy. Like there's a lot of interconnectedness, and there's a lot of weirdness. I mean, there's a reason why John the Baptist was beheaded. Do you remember? Off topic, but do you remember why? Yeah, the wife. Herod's wife shouldn't have. It was actually his half-brother's wife, and there was a whole thing. Okay, so yeah, a lot of messy family history there, but it was Herod. Now, getting back on track, Herod. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Why would Pilate bring Herod into the mix?
Because wasn't he over Galilee like that was his territory?
He was. This is interesting because in this discussion that Jesus Jesus didn't talk a whole lot. He did a little bit, but that Pilate was having with the Jews. They're going back and forth, and Pilate had said there's nothing wrong with this guy. But then the Jews said something, and what did they say in the book of Luke? Remember that? What did they say that made Pilate decide, let's send him on?
So he started in Galilee and came through.
Yeah. It was and they were just like, look at how bad this guy is. He started in Galilee and he came all through. And then Pilate's like, ooh, okay, I can see a way out of this. This is not even my jurisdiction. Like Galilee, I know just the guy. And being in the Praetorium, they would be very close. So it's not like he had to ship him off very far. Just think maybe like a separate courtroom. That's a sloppy illustration. But so he sends him to Herod. Now, can you tell me a little bit about that? What was that like?
Verse 12 says that they were enmity before this encounter, and after they became friends.
Yeah, if there's one good thing that came out of this is we got a new friendship. And maybe that's probably not a great thing. But yeah, before this, they didn't like each other. And it's funny, the enemy of my enemy sometimes becomes my friend. And Jesus is the thing that brought them together. And for all the wrong reasons. But he did. So Herod, what was his response at first when Pilate said, "Oh, I'm going to send you a guy"?
He was excited about
Yeah.
it.
You want to see?
Yeah. He wanted to see him because he was so interested in his teaching and he wanted to know what are the ways of life. No, that's not it. What was he hoping?
See America.
Yeah. It was like, it would probably be pretty equivalent to like bringing in a juggler or whatever. He was wanting entertainment. And he heard about all the signs that he was doing. He was like, yes, finally. What was the conversation between Jesus and Herod like?
Jesus didn't answer anything.
Yeah, it was very one-sided. Jesus refused to answer. And you have here still not the apostles, the high priest and the Jews, there we go. They were still like throwing stuff at him and Herod's questioning him, but he gets nowhere. So what happens there? What does Herod decide to do? Yeah, go right back to Pilate. And he did something though. What did he do? Anything that stands out to you? Yeah, put a robe on him. Because Jesus looked cold? Like, why did he do that? Yeah, exactly. He's saying King of the Jews. Okay, well, here's a robe. And so he puts on the robe and sends him back. Okay, so that's interesting. Once he gets back to Pilate, it seems like that's at the point where the soldiers who were there with Pilate do something to Jesus as well. What happens there? What? Yeah, crown of thorns and all of those things. And so maybe they started with Herod's, egging him on. And then Pilate was like, I'll join in the fun too. And we have those soldiers who are doing that to him. And so we see a lot of humiliation happening. I mean, that's just, imagine what Jesus is experiencing right now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out. We kind of get wrapped up in the story, but just think about how demeaning this is to our God. Putting a fake robe on, and I don't know what mode of transportation would have been for it, but sitting back and forth between these leaders, maybe on a horse or chained up, tied up, something.
Oh, this is awful. I mean, just imagine. One of the things that the Jews had said about Jesus is he makes himself out to be the Son of God. And so because of that, he needs to die. Why would they say that? Like, what were they thinking when they said that?
They were thinking blasphemy. For them, they knew that wouldn't fly with Pilate, so that's why they had to come up with a sedition, this idea that he was a seditionist in order for it to pass by Pilate. But they knew they couldn't execute him, and so they had to trump up these other charges that were given.
Exactly. Yeah, there we go. So we have Jesus. They said he makes himself out to be the Son of God. So according to our law, he needs to die. And Pilate was like, what does that have to do with me? But they were bringing him up on blasphemy charges. Because if you blaspheme, yeah, you were worthy of death. But just think about what's happening with this whole situation. Jesus was making himself out to be the Son of God because he was. And now, if you are on the side of the Jews, that's not a good look for you.
Well, they were jealous. And that was, he compromised their whole system. How they did this, he challenged everything by being who he was. And he was, in acknowledging who he was dismantling that whole, that's what was gonna happen with his death, is all that whole system was gonna be dismantled. And they didn't like that. I mean, he could do miracles. They knew that. They knew who he was. And they was gonna stop all of that.
And that's exactly right. They were afraid of losing their position. I mean, sound familiar? I mean, that's what Pilate was. It's funny how similar the Jews and Pilate are in this situation. I mean, they were afraid because Jesus was getting all these followers. We just really got to do something about that. Pilate was afraid because of Rome. Now, when it comes down to it, where should our fear be? We should care more about what the Lord wants, right? And that's where our fear is, and that's what motivates us to do the right thing. What other things have you noticed or did you see that stand out to you?
Well,
Okay.
I think Pilate was already on shaky ground. Josephus reports that he had committed several atrocities prior to this. He was on thin ice.
Right.
The Jews took advantage of that, talk about him being no friend of Rome. And that was certainly the tipping point. But Pilate, by all accounts, made many attempts to try to extricate himself from this.
Right.
But also, I mean, scourging and, under Roman policy, usually, in most cases, preceded crucifixion. And ultimately, as you said, to fulfill prophecy, remember that there's multiple occasions in which he said he's going to be pierced for our transgressions. And, I mean, Jesus knew that. He knew he would have to undergo a piercing of some sort. And there's many cases in which you can say he was pierced. But he was pierced before, during, and after his death on the cross. But he knew he had to endure those things. So you don't see him trying to wiggle his way out of this or try to talk his way out of this. In fact, he admits clearly that he is who he claims to be. And so he had to go through it.
That's a great point. And I mean, it goes back to how Jesus was in control this whole time. And I believe if Jesus had stood up for himself and even said anything, he could have probably found a way to get out of it. But that's not his goal. His purpose was, and the book of John uses the illustration, he constantly said that the Son of Man will be lifted up. Like in this, again, that's how lifted up, glorified, but also lifted up on the cross. And that was that moment. But Jesus was absolutely in control of all of this situation. Now there's a couple things that I think are interesting. I just want to throw them out there. So when Pilate was washing his hands in the situation, and he said, I'm innocent of this man's blood. You see to it yourselves. What did the people respond with? What did they say? Yeah. It's like, his blood be on us and our children. Do you know what Acts 5, when the apostles were being interrogated about Jesus, they were told in, let's see, what I had it written down somewhere. Acts 5:28. One thing that the response against that so the apostles were brought before the council, and they were being punished and that sort of thing. But in verse 28, we gave you strict orders not to continue teaching in this name, and yet you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Does that seem strange to you? Because that's what they were asking for before. It was like, his blood's on us. We got it. And now at this point, the council, who was some of the ones responsible for this, and probably some of the ones saying this later, they say, you're trying to put his blood on us. Yeah, they did because you asked for it. And ultimately, I think we see there was retribution for this. AD 70. They got taken out. Okay, so there's that. Any other things that you all want to mention about any of this?
Well, I think it may be interesting to point out that once someone was named high priest, they were high priest for life. And the high priest at this time was Caiaphas, but ultimately, who does Jesus go to first? He goes to Annas, who's his father-in-law. And so they take him to Annas first, being that he's truly the high priest, but Caiaphas was appointed by Rome as high priest. He had to be stamped and approved by Rome to be the high priest. So he was the high priest really by Roman authority. Annas was not. Even though Annas, probably among Jews, was still considered the high priest. But Caiaphas' position 100%, and as was said earlier, the entire platform and position they had as Sadducees, the money they made was fundamentally attached to Rome. It was fundamentally connected to their stability and position under Rome.
It's very clear that Rome was in control. And just over all of this, even the high priest Rome put them into place. It's funny because up until this point, all the Jews were like, we need to find somebody to get rid of this Roman rule and all of that sort of thing. And then they make themselves to be like, we love Caesar and he is our king. We don't have any other king. And, this guy's making himself out to be a king and opposes Caesar. You're not a friend of Caesar. It's like, really? Come on now. They knew the position they were in and they knew what they were doing. But without Pilate, we don't think we would have the crucifixion. And unfortunately, we need that. Because like Barabbas, we deserve that punishment, but Jesus takes that. Hopefully the next couple lessons, we'll clear up some of those details. Thank you all for class. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you.